right, wonderful. Welcome to Success Principles, everybody. Nice to see some friendly faces. Awesome. Well, happy Friday. How was everybody today? Thumbs up? Good stuff. Right on. Okay. I see, looks like Jamie's just logging back in here. All right. We're live. Okay. Well, lately we've been talking about fear and faith and how to replace fear with hope or replace fear with faith, right? And I remember very distinctly when I made the realization that both faith and fear require us to believe in something that we can't see, right? And one's just a lot more empowering, isn't it? One's just a lot more expansive, includes so many more opportunities. One's a little bit more uplifting, don't you think? I would think so. And in my experience, I've found that, and maybe you guys would agree, that life rewards the brave. That's what I've learned. And sometimes the biggest challenge is just overcoming that fear, that obstacle. And once we move past that, we're always better off. I did a poll on the social media the other day, and it was unanimous. 100% of people who chimed in agreed that, hey, yeah, you know what? When I finally did overcome my fear and take a chance on the thing that I wanted, it's like no matter how it turned out, I was always glad that I did it. And I thought that's really interesting. That should be very informative, you know? Yeah, it's an interesting idea. But today we're going to be talking about, we're going to pick up where we left off last week. Last week we ended talking about the importance of self-discipline or self-control. Okay. And Napoleon Hill in Success Principles or in Success Habits here, he says that if there's one thing that people need more than all other things combined, it's discipline over self. Discipline over self. He says, here is self-discipline in its highest order, keeping your mind fixed on the things that you want in life and off of the things that you don't want. He says, do you know that the majority of people go all the way through their life with their minds dominated by the things that they don't want? You know, in my experience would tell me that's true. You know, now, both faith and fear are states of mind. They're states of mind. Now, that tells me that it can be trained. A state of faith or a state of mind that's consumed by fear. Both are trained. One's probably a little bit more conscious. One's probably a little bit more intentional. One operates on default. But if they can be trained, how do you do that? Well, you do that by learning to discipline the mind, right? Now that's a big word for a lot of people. It's a loaded word, isn't it? Discipline comes with a lot of sometimes baggage for people to unpack. Now, we're going to do a little exercise here. We're going to take about 3 minutes. Does everybody have a pen and a paper handy? Okay, a little pen and paper. So what I'd like you guys to do is start a fresh page. And at the top of the page, just write the word discipline. Okay, write the word discipline. And I want you guys to write down the first 10 words that come to mind when I say discipline. We'll take 3 minutes here. right, cool. I just love that little audio recording. It's so peaceful. That's actually like that's what my neighborhood looks like. Like I live like kind of like right in the rainforest or the jungle. I go for a walk outside, and that's what I'm met with. It's gorgeous. And sometimes I just put that on my computer while I'm doing work and things like that. It's just like so kind of like meditative or calming, just in the background, you know. It's nice. Anyway, okay. So would anybody care to share what words came up for them, or what some of the things that came to mind when we mentioned the word discipline? Tony.
Control.
Control.
Do you want to hear more?
Sure. Let's give a few.
Progress, regulation, power, routine, strength, and courageous.
And courageous.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Okay, right on. Thanks, Tony. Melissa.
I kind of extended on one of Tony's where she said routine. And this was probably the biggest one for me. Routine equals discipline, and discipline equals routine.
Oh, so cyclical there.
I think that those two things go very much hand in hand.
Right.
And you can't have one without the other.
Right.
In my experience.
So they support one another.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. I like that, Melissa. Anybody else? Brett says someone who's disciplined, has integrity, high value, respected, is a leader, is a role model. Would you guys agree with that? Yeah. Out of curiosity, did anybody have any like negative kind of connotations or words that came to mind? Thomas is nodding his head. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, just because we have kids, small kids, I just kind of right away thought of punishment, but I'm like, oh, that's so negative, but it came to my mind.
Sure, for sure. Yeah. Anything else?
Like to obey, like willpower, being focused and determination, stuff like that. More positive.
Cool. More positive. Yeah, I like it. You know, it's interesting because, you know, we've talked a little bit about allowing our like thoughts, our ideas, and our beliefs to bubble to the surface. And just taking a couple of minutes to write down some things that come up when you think about a word or an idea will give you some insights as to what your relationship with that is. And in preparation for this call, I did this exercise myself, and words that came up for me were things like badass, hardcore, like Brett was saying, discipline or leadership, you know, winning, success, different things like that. I asked my wife, I asked Anna, what are some of the things that come up for you? And the first word out of her mouth was, ugh. I couldn't tell if I'm just annoying her because it's like, you know, sometimes she's like, I don't want to hear this right now. But it's like, ugh. And then some of the words, it was kind of equal. It was like some of them were negative. She, you know, she said things like, well, hard work, you know, structure. She said change is hard, you know, some of those types of things. But then she said routine and some of that type of thing too. So, you know, our perceptions and our attitudes around discipline shape our behavior, doesn't it? My wife is a little bit, let's say, stubborn. And I used to be a personal trainer, and I tried training her one time. And I was like, okay, drop and give me 10. And she was like, forget that. You do 10 push-ups. I was like, all right, well, this isn't going to work. But she's got a little bit of like I don't want to say a problem with authority, but when you talk about discipline, it's like it's either her way or no way. And that's not entirely true. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you see the point that I'm making there. But it should be very informative for you to see what comes up and what your relationship with discipline is. Now, here's the thing. The definition of discipline, I looked this up. There's discipline, and the definition is very similar to what Thomas spoke of. The definition of discipline is to train people to obey using punishment. Okay. Now, that doesn't sound like much fun to me. I always thought I'd be like giving swats and stuff, like spanks on the butt and that sort of thing with my little kids. Turns out I really don't like that kind of thing. It really does pain me more than it pains the kids. So I just don't do that. Not saying that there's anything wrong with it, but then there's self-discipline. Self-discipline. Okay. Now this is really interesting. The definition for self-discipline, okay, is the ability to regulate one's emotions, thoughts, and behaviors in the face of temptation and impulses. As an executive function of the mind, it is a cognitive process that is necessary for regulating one's behavior in order to achieve specific goals. Now that seems a lot more in tune with and aligned with our philosophy and what we've been talking about, doesn't it? I'm going to read this one more time. The ability to regulate one's emotions, regulate one's thoughts and behaviors, okay, in the face of temptation or impulses as an executive function of the mind. It is a cognitive process that is necessary for regulating one's behavior in order to achieve a specific goal. To me, that just sounds like self-mastery, doesn't it? You know, and I believe it was in Momentum Mastermind when we were talking about the 7 levels of awareness. Right at the very pinnacle is mastery. Now, very few people ever really reach mastery, but what we're talking about there is about self-regulating your emotions, your thoughts, your behaviors, learning to co-create your life, co-create, right? And it's about learning to respond intentionally rather than react to everything that's going on around you, right? Self-mastery. Who doesn't want to master themselves? If you're not a master yourself, well, sometimes you're like a puppet on a string. If you're allowing other people and other situations to control your thoughts and your emotions, I don't know about you, but I don't want to give up that kind of power to somebody else. You know? So in Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill quotes Plato. And if you guys saw that email that I sent out yesterday, there's a similar quote by Aristotle. Okay. But Plato says that the first and best victory is to conquer self. To be conquered by self is of all things the most shameful and vile. He says the first and best victory is to conquer self, learning to control ourself. Okay. I think so oftentimes we spend a ridiculous amount of energy trying to control things that are outside of our control. Really, when we focus on the things that we can control, that's a game changer, you know? But did you guys know that there's actually 3 forms of self-discipline? 3 forms of self-discipline, okay? There's active, reactive, and proactive. Active, reactive, and proactive. Now, active self-discipline is like when you're in the moment and you're making a decision, and you got to decide like, well, am I eating the packed lunch that I brought to work, or am I going to like have the pizza that they brought in because it's casual Friday? That's that like active self-discipline. Okay. Or it's like choosing to do a workout right now rather than like, you know, jump on the couch and watch whatever Netflix special your spouse is watching. Okay. It's having that discipline in that moment, being able to choose. Okay. Then there's reactive self-discipline. Now, reactive self-discipline is like learning to control your reactions and your emotions in the face of like unexpected obstacles or challenges. When things come up, how do you respond? Or do you just react instinctively? You know, you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off and then gives you the finger, you know, how are you reacting in that situation? Or are you using self-control, self-discipline? Okay. And then there's proactive self-discipline. And proactive self-discipline is setting yourself up for success. It's going to bed early. It's sitting down on Sunday night and writing out your schedule or your plan for the week. It's taking 3 to 5 minutes at the end of the day to like think about what your biggest priorities are the next day. You know, it's it's doing your food prep. You know, it's planning ahead, investing in your future. You know, make sure that when you start the day or start the week, you're hitting green lights. Okay. But here's the thing. Where is it here? In our essay, Enforcing Self-Discipline, he says that self-discipline is the process that ties all of these efforts together. Okay, very first paragraph. It's the process that ties all of these things together. And really, you think about it, it's necessary in any endeavor, isn't it? I mean, self-discipline is required to do your affirmations, do your visualizations, do your workouts, do your meditations, do your studying. You know, all of those things require discipline. But you'll notice, okay, that if you're not disciplined to your goals, you're probably disciplined to your vices, aren't you? You ever think of it like that? You know, I've said before, in if you're not consciously creating good habits, you're probably unconsciously creating bad habits. And if you're not consciously disciplined to your goals, make no mistake, you're probably unconsciously disciplined to your vices. Don't believe me? Open your phone right now and check out how much usage you have on your social media over the past week. I won't share with you what mine is. I'm just saying. More than I want it to be. I'll just say that. Okay, but it's true. And don't tell me that that doesn't take time, focus, energy, attention, consistency. If that's not discipline, I don't know what is. The truth is that your goals are either conscious or unconscious. When I realized that, my head just about popped off. My goals are either conscious, to grow, to expand, to learn, to earn, or they're unconscious, to stay safe, stay comfortable, stay small, you know. But it requires discipline, no matter which way you slice it. Your goals or your vices. Now, if you ask me, I'd much prefer my goals to be conscious. I better make sure that my discipline is used consciously rather than unconsciously. Now, I was reminded of an experiment that was done a number of years ago. Are you guys familiar with the marshmallow experiment? I think I mentioned this before, but the marshmallow experiment was developed to measure children's ability to delay gratification. Children's ability to delay gratification. And what they did was they took a group full of kids and they plopped them down into a room and they put one marshmallow in front of these kids. And they told them, well, you can either have this marshmallow now, but if you wait like 20 minutes or whatever it was, we'll give you 2. And then they sat there on the other side of this like invisible glass and they just observed these kids. And then they tracked these kids for a prolonged period of time. And the results were really interesting. But I've got a little video that I'm going to pull up here and share with you guys. Can you guys see this okay? Do you guys see this? Yeah? Yeah.
What is this marshmallow test? Well, when you look at children and you look at all the different theories about what makes successful kids, you realize that almost all the theories are wrong because they haven't been verified. Like, for example, high IQ. you have a lot of high IQ people who become marginal members of society. And so what is the one psychological test that correlates with success in life? And I found out that it's the marshmallow test. You get kids and ask them, do you want a marshmallow now or 2 marshmallows a few hours from now? And the kids that want the marshmallow now tend to be those that want shortcuts, those that don't want to do the hard work. They want the quick kill. They grab that marshmallow. But the other ones say, no, wait a minute. If I wait 2 hours, I can get 2 marshmallows. I can hold out. There's a pot of gold waiting for me. They're not going to take the shortcut. And so you say to yourself, well, that's a test for kids. But then you track them decade by decade by decade. And you find that they are more successful. They have a lower divorce rate, higher income, higher status in society, that don't want that simple payoff now, but are going to delay gratification into the future. And so I realized that that's the key to success in life, not just science, but in life. Don't take the shortcuts.
But can it be taught?
Well, part of it is your personality that is formed when you're very young. Okay, let's be very clear about that. But I think that, yes, I think that, for example, it turns out that if you do the same thing with poor children and the same thing with middle-class children, it turns out that poor children will, in general, go for the quick kill because they know that things disappear real fast. If there's money in the house, it's gone in the future. If you can show people that there is a pot of gold out there, that yes, you hold out, you go to college, you'll learn the discipline, there's a pot of gold out there. You can learn to appreciate that fact. What we have in the brain that is different from animals is we understand time. We understand the future. My grandparents came to California 100 years ago. But imagine, back then, life expectancy was 49 years of age. I mean, you were born, you had kids, and died. Life was a bitch. Now we have an increased lifespan. We have all the luxury goods. Instead of yelling out the window, which is what my grandparents did to communicate, we have the internet. And so when you look at it the long term, decade for decade, you realize the enormous progress that we've made. We constantly daydream, we scheme, we plot. We constantly think about what could be. Now let's do an experiment. Go home tonight and teach your dog the concept of tomorrow. Try it. Teach your dog the concept of tomorrow, the next week, the next year, and you realize you can't. Animals live in the present. And that's what I think intelligence is. Intelligence is being able to map the future, simulate the future. So if you get an experiment, people with low IQ and high IQ, put them in the same room, and you give them the same job, rob a bank. You'll find out that the low IQ people probably do a much better job of robbing a bank, plotting the bank robbery, than high IQ people who get all messed up with legal implications and stuff like that. The point is that you can have some very smart robbers because they see the future. And that's what we humans do that animals cannot. We constantly daydream. We constantly create worlds that don't exist. And to me, that's what intelligence is. Some people ask me, well, what is the meaning of life then? And I say to myself that if somebody gives you from up high the meaning of life, it's too easy. I mean, is that all? My attitude is that it's self-discovery. We have to reinvent ourselves, that we have to recreate ourselves, that the meaning of life is rediscovery.
Interesting, isn't it? Any thoughts come up for you guys when you watch that? What jumped out at you, or what resonated with you from that? Anything significant to you?
Makes me want to try the marshmallow test now on my kids.
With your kids,
See
yeah.
see where they're at.
If it's a predictor of future success, eh?
Yeah. Well, then, yeah, and then if they take it right away, then I've got some training to do, I guess.
Right, interesting. Jamie's saying, don't do it. Funny. Anything else? Melissa?
Yeah, I think at the end when he talks about like what life is and that, you know, you have to constantly reinvent yourself and grow that way and move forward. And And then, I mean, at the beginning of the course, I wrote down big across my page, you said life rewards the brave. And that really stood out to me. So it's just one of those things that, I mean, for me, my place where I'm stuck in this whole change of my life is trying to take that leap of faith and that step forward and change the role I've known for 20 years in my current career and do something different that I'm so passionate about. So like constantly hearing things like that, it just makes you realize like if you have the passion, you can't fail. Like you just have to like reinvent yourself and move forward. And that's what life's about. Because I
Right.
don't want to look back in 20 years being in this job for then 40 years and saying like, wow, what I could have, should have done. Right. So
Right.
yeah, I like that. And what is life? I like that part.
Right. Have you ever consciously reinvented yourself in the past?
I mean, I think for me, when I chose to get into fitness competing,
Right.
that was something that was a reinvention for me because I never really was into like health and fitness in my early 20s. I was all about like the party and a good time.
Right.
So like that was a huge shift for me personally, like mentally, physically, discipline, like it all had to happen immediately if I was going to do it.
Right.
And I did grow and I became a very different person. And I mean, a lot of those skills have stayed with me and it ignited my passion for health and wellness overall. So, but I mean, that's the last time, I guess, in becoming a mother. I think becoming a parent is a
Sure.
huge shift for most people, right?
Good
But
point.
that was like the last time I ever really did anything that like truly shifted everything about my life, who I was, who people perceived me to be. And didn't like, and I think stepping on stage, like that was the end goal, which is like totally scary, especially when you see the bikini you have to wear. So yeah, like I think that's the last time I did it, and I'm like craving that again. I'm craving like the shift and the change and like something new and to be inspired again.
So
Yeah.
you've done it before, so you know that it's possible.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But this is, I think, the biggest thing for me. There was no money attached to that.
Mm.
Right. The shift that I want to take is like what allows me to like survive in this world, like pay my bills and buy food. And so I think there's that extra level of like fear associated or attached to this shift
Right.
that I know many people can probably relate to. But yeah, that's like my biggest hurdle in all of it is being having faith that the money will come.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a belief attached to that fear too, isn't there?
Yeah, I guess. Like, I guess it's, yeah, just changing. I mean, that's where like this is all like these last few classes and hours have really been about that shift and learning how to like overcome and believe. And if you have an exact idea of what you want, like deafness of purpose, I mean, that's the
Right.
start, right? But
Right.
yeah, it's just the steps now.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything that jumped out at you or resonated with you from that film or that little clip?
Yeah, I think I agree with what Melissa was saying, but I think we're constantly shifting and we don't even really realize it sometimes until we've shifted, right? Like becoming a parent, like she said, like you don't expect that and it just happens and all of a sudden you've shifted and then you can look back and say, hey, like I did it without even thinking it should be easy, right? Like, and I had a similar experience when I was younger with music and getting on stage. Like I never thought I'd get on and, let alone sit in front of a bunch of peers and play music of all these musicians around you that are way better than you. And like, here's some original stuff we did. And like, I never thought I could do that, but then you did and you go through that shift. And,
right.
Like, we're constantly doing that. So like, it is part of life and it is part of the meaning of life because like, it's just natural to us to want to do that, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I think you're right, Thomas. And oftentimes we can make the mistake of shifting or making those changes and changing our self-image. That's what it is. That's what we're talking about here. changing our self-image unconsciously, without conscious control or direction. If you listen to Bob Proctor says that he's had three, I think was what he said, three very distinct self-images. When I look back at my past and my past lives, I think I've had closer to like 5 or 6. Now, most of those were unconscious. I went from being a soccer player who was very like active and athlete and jock to being a pothead and a stoner. And trust me, make no mistake, I definitely identified as a stoner or a pothead. Okay. Then when I got into accepted to law school, I was, you know, on that plane. And then gym owner. And I've shared with you guys before, whether it was an Unstuck or a Momentum Mastermind, that my self-image now, I completely had to shed that skin. I went through a period where I shaved my head. I was having my, like what I call my Britney Spears moment, trying to like figure out, who am I? You know, and nothing in my world today, okay, is the same as it was 2 or 3 years ago. Nothing. Where I live, what I drive, how I dress, how I speak, the type of work that I do, my income level, my relationship, my health, nothing. What I read, what I watch, what I listen to, nothing. That was probably the first time, though, that it was an intentional reinvention of my self-image. You're right, Thomas. We can do it haphazardly, unconsciously, as we grow and life circumstances change, or we can take the reins and do it ourselves. And Melissa, to your point there about the income, Bob Proctor would say that if you want to start earning at the level of your goal, start serving at the level of your goal. And we've talked before about the law of compensation, you know, increasing the quantity of the people that you serve and increasing the quality of your product or service, right? We won't get into that too much today, but you know, Tom Bilyeu, who was the host of that interview or that podcast where he was speaking with that man, he says that the ability to delay gratification is like the single most important ingredient of success. That ability to delay gratification. The single most important ingredient to success. Now, if you ask different people, they're going to give you a different response, right? Angela Duckworth, like we mentioned last week, would say that it's grit. I'm not sure that that's all that different than delayed gratification, to be honest with you. Persistence, grit, delayed gratification, all of that, discipline, that all sounds pretty similar, doesn't it? Now, that study has been replicated a few different times, okay? And the marshmallow test, and if you end up doing that, Thomas and Jamie, let me know how that goes. I'd be interested. I've thought about doing it with my kids too, but then I'm a little bit fearful, like, ooh, what if they just gobble them up, or shoot, what am I doing? But that study has been replicated a few times. Okay. And there was one study that I was reading about in preparation for this that I thought was really interesting, where they took a group of kids or students and they broke them up into 3 groups. Okay, same study, but the first group, what they did was they entertained them, or they had them doing some fun activities and some things that were like interesting and exciting. Okay. The second group, what they did was they had them think about their treat. And the third group of people had them telling them sad stories and getting them emotionally down. Okay. Well, not surprisingly, the group that was involved in entertainment and activities and doing things that were a bit of a distraction or something that was fun, they ended up on average being able to resist that temptation of the marshmallow for about 15 minutes. They were at the top. Okay, about 15 minutes. Okay, the second group of people who were focused and fixated on the treat, okay, they lasted about 5 minutes. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, because, well, if you're sitting there just thinking about, oh, that marshmallow looks so good, oh my God, my mouth's watering, like, you're relying solely on willpower, aren't you? resisting that temptation. And I've said before, but it's worth saying again, that willpower is a limited resource. The people who have the strongest willpower are the ones that don't have to rely on it that often. That's why it's important to design your environment so that you're not tempted by certain things. Okay, removing them. Okay, making success simple. And then the third group of people, they didn't even last like 2 minutes, I think. The sad people, the ones that were being told depressing stories and things like that, and they gobbled up that marshmallow right away. And I thought that was super interesting. I mean, I can relate to being somewhat of an emotional eater. I don't know if anybody else on this call can relate to that, but it's like, oh man, sometimes, you know, if I'm down, as I know that I'm not feeling well when I'm craving that kind of stuff. Okay, but it told me something else. It told me that what you focus on matters. What you focus on makes a difference. Now, we talked about the law of cause and effect in the past. The law of cause and effect is like universal law number 1. The law of cause and effect states that for every action, there's a reaction, right? Cause and effect. Now, I want you to think about your morning this morning. Okay? And what are some of the things that you did when you woke up today? Did you hop out of bed, or did you press snooze and roll over for a few extra minutes? Did you do your affirmations and your visualization first thing, or is that later or tomorrow? Did you do a cold shower or a warm shower? Did you have breakfast? And if so, what did you have for breakfast? Was it something quick and on the go? Something carb loaded and full of sugar? Or was it like high protein, nutritious? Or are you fasting? Okay. Did you do a workout this morning? Now, the question that I really wanted to ask you is, are you in your daily activities and in your morning routine or your routine in general, are you more interested in the cause, or are you more interested in the effect? Where are you spending your time, your energy, and your attention? Are you focused on the cause, or are you focused on the effect? Now, make no mistake here. Like, let's say a workout, for example. It's an easy one that everybody can relate to. But a workout, like, there's a cause and an effect. Sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that I like to work out, that I like to exercise. I fucking hate it. I really I despise it. And in fact, I'll do all sorts of things to stall, to waste time, to procrastinate. You know, like, it's embarrassing, but it's true. Okay. Now, I don't necessarily like the workouts, but I like the way that I feel afterwards. I like the confidence that comes with it, the rush that comes with the feel-good endorphins and things like that. You know, I don't even necessarily like to study or read this stuff over and over and over again, but I like the effect of it. You know, when we're talking about cold showers, same thing. Who wants to jump in a cold shower or a cold plunge? If you do, you might want to get your head checked. You might be a little psycho, you know? It does not feel good. My son, he's been watching me do this for the last little while. He told me the other day, "Hey, Dad, I'm ready." He came downstairs. It was so cute. He had his bathing suit on and everything. And so, all right, well, let's do this. And so dipped him in. He got up to his ankles before I was like, "No, okay, I'm done." Well, yeah, I saw that coming. You know, but same with like building a business. Are you interested in the cause or in the effect? In fact, I had a real interesting conversation this week with a woman, and this woman's been a client for a while, and she's looking at starting her own business. Okay. Now, let me tell you, this woman is infinitely more qualified to start a business at this stage than I ever was when I started my business. Okay. She has way more experience, like 20 years in an industry, all the networking, all the connections, all the information, all the knowledge, that sort of thing. Okay. And I was sharing that with her. And she said, yeah, but Matt, you've got something that I don't. And I said, oh yeah, what's that? And she said, you have the discipline. And I had to pause for a second, and I thought, well, is that true? And I thought, maybe there's some truth to that, but I'll tell. She said, I read your story that you posted a little while ago about when you went to the cabin, you locked yourself in the cabin for 3 days and didn't come out until you had the finished product of Unstuck. She said you wrote a whole program from start to finish. She said you had the discipline to do that. She said, I see you doing these workshops and you're doing these free speaking events and you're putting yourself out there. She's like, that takes discipline. I'm like, well, maybe. But I think that it more has to do with like fear of failure or a sense of urgency. That's what that is. I'm terrified for this not to go well. That's what drives me. It's that fear of failure. And to be honest with you, that sense of urgency or sometimes that fear can be a real motivating factor, can't it? 100%. In fact, I remember a conversation that I had with Wally Ma. Some of you guys might be familiar with Wally Ma. He's one of the richest people in Saskatchewan, probably. But I remember having a conversation with Wally a number of years ago. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Wally Ma, he owns Northridge Developments. Okay, it's a huge company all over Saskatchewan. And I remember a conversation where he was telling me that prior to Northridge, he worked for the CRA. He had a government position, was well paid. He had a pension and all of these sorts of things. And when he left the CRA to open up his own thing, he actually started selling cars, I believe. Okay? And people laughed at him. People thought he was nuts. In fact, I think his dad gave him shit for it. It was like, are you crazy? This is a terrible idea. You're leaving a government position to go start your own thing. Okay. And, he said that he got laughed at and ridiculed by a lot of people, criticized. Okay. And he said that it was part of his success was that he was so terrified of failing that he just worked over and over and over and over again and was relentless in his pursuit of success. In fact, he told me one day that, for years, he felt like he was like running from failure. He said, and it wasn't until much, much later in life that he stopped, looked back and realized that nobody was chasing him anymore. That he had done all of the work and been so consistent that now it wasn't a matter of winning or losing. He said, I worked so hard and I did it for so long that I couldn't not win. And I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? But the truth is that sometimes that fear of failure can be a real motivating factor too, isn't it? But it's almost like, how you use that, what you're focusing on. Are you focused on the cause or are you focused on the effect? There's a brilliant audio recording by Earl Nightingale called The Common Denominator of Success. The Common Denominator of Success. I'll share it with you guys. I'll send it to you. But Earl Nightingale says that the common denominator of success is, get this, it's that successful people have developed the habit of doing the things that failures don't like to do. Well, I heard that the first time and I was like, well, no shit, Sherlock. Like, thanks for pointing out the obvious here. But he goes on to say that successful people are in the habit. He says successful people don't necessarily enjoy the activity, but they enjoy the result of doing that activity. They enjoy the result of doing that activity, the effect of that thing. And if you listen to this audio recording, he actually says that success is reserved for the minority of people. Why is success reserved for the minority of people? He says it's unnatural. Success is unnatural. And the reason is because that It is not to be achieved by following our natural likes and dislikes. Success is an uphill journey, isn't it? Can be, anyway. And most people, we know that most people allow themselves to be controlled by what? Their emotions. Most people aren't logical creatures. Most people act emotionally based on what they're feeling in the moment. Okay. Now, if you guys have read this Enforced Self-Discipline essay, I thought this was really interesting. Okay. We're talking about emotions here. It says that self-discipline calls for balancing your emotions with your reasoning. This means that you must learn to consult both your feelings and your reason before you reach a decision. He goes on a couple of paragraphs down. He says, don't forget, your emotions provide your driving force, your driving power, the activating force which enables you to put your decisions into action. You must control and direct your emotions, not abolish them. You must control them and direct them, not abolish them. And I've said this before, that oftentimes our emotions are meant to be expressed. Okay, they're meant to be expressed. And if they're not expressed, they're what? They're often suppressed. And suppressed emotions eventually lead to depressed or depression. Suppression leads to depression. Okay, he says that emotions are like a river, and their power can be dammed up and released under control and direction. Okay, but it cannot be held forever in check. Sooner or later, the dam will burst, unleashing catastrophic destruction. Right? Unleashing catastrophic destruction. Now, that just tells me that our emotions are our driving force. They're what propel us to act, take action. So it's our job and our responsibility to direct those emotions. Where are we directing them? Are we directing them to what we want? Or are we allowing them to be directed towards what we don't want? We need to be channeling that energy towards our goals, towards the reward, towards what we want to achieve in life, towards what our higher self is calling us to do. And in the past, I've mentioned this Hebb's Law. Hebb's Law is the psychological phenomenon that neurons that fire together wire together. And when you get in the habit of revisiting the reasons why you're pursuing your goal and all of the positive benefits and positive rewards, and you're allowing those emotions to direct you and drive your behavior, you're probably going to be a lot more successful, aren't you? I would think so. The truth is that when we focus on what our higher self is calling us to do, it opens up all kinds of doors. When we talk about self-discipline, in my opinion, is actually one of the highest forms of self-love. You know, there's a lot of paradoxes in life, and I think this is just another one of them. And that self-discipline is actually a form of self-care. People talk about self-care and they self-love and they think it's bubble baths and, you know, like sparkling wine in the bathtub and doing your nails and shit like that. Well, I don't know, maybe that's some of it. But the truth is that in my opinion and in my experience, self-care is like usually doing the hard shit. It's usually doing the deep work. It's usually doing the things that don't feel natural, or like, Earl Nightingale says, not following our natural likes and dislikes. Jocko Willink has a phrase that was very similar to what Melissa echoed earlier on our call. And he says that discipline equals freedom. Discipline equals freedom. And I find that without discipline, you become a slave to your impulses. You get pulled in every which way imaginable based on how you're feeling in the moment. You know, people who rely on motivation is great if it's there, but people who rely on motivation or feeling motivated to do something, those people, you know, are pretty hit and miss. Pretty inconsistent, don't you think? Brett and I were having a conversation the other day, and he said something really smart. He said that discipline is infinitely more important than motivation. And I couldn't agree more. You know, without discipline, you become a drifter, in the words of Napoleon Hill, kind of taking the path of least resistance. In Success Habits, he says that a river is meant to drift and meander, but not men and women. Isn't that the truth? We need a focus, we need a goal, we need a direction. Okay. Now, without discipline, Napoleon Hill says that the penalty for not taking possession of your own mind, for not disciplining it, consists in the fact that you will become the victim of circumstance. Oof. Okay. In other words, you'll be blown about hither and yonder in life, just like a dry leaf in the wind. Learn to take possession of your own mind and keep it focused on things that are beneficial to you and off of the things that are not beneficial to you. Without discipline, you'll be a victim of circumstance. I would agree. But let me ask you, you know, we're talking about disciplining our mind, maintaining a positive mental attitude, right? Talking about focusing our attention on what it is that we'd like to achieve. We're talking about doing our gratitudes, things like that. But what else should we be disciplined with? What other kinds of things come up for, like, what else do we need to be disciplined about?
So at the beginning of this call, my answers were completely different than everyone else, so I didn't share, but I think they would relate to now. So like emotions and thoughts and your behavior, your habits, your goals, persistence, your actions, your finances, exercise, nutrition.
Right. Yeah. Habits, exercise, nutrition, finances. Yeah, 100%. What else? It's interesting, Jamie, you mentioned nutrition. Napoleon Hill says that if you want to begin to control your mind, control your stomach. And I heard that, or I read that, and I thought, well, maybe, but maybe this is a situation like Melissa's talking about, where it works both ways. It's cyclical, because I find when I control my stomach, I control my mind too.
Your gut is connected to your mind.
Yeah, bingo. You know, and you guys would probably know more about that than I do. And, you know, I thought of Melissa as I was prepping that, and I thought that's true. Don't they say that your gut is like your second brain or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Produces 80% of your serotonin levels.
Okay, there you go. Right.
So
You know, and I've had conversations in the past about when you're addicted to sugar, it's like your brain, or sorry, your gut kind of overrides a lot of your thinking processes and just craves and demands more sugar. It becomes the driver of the bus, you know? So I think it's maybe one of those situations that's kind of cyclical. When you control your mind, you control your stomach. And when you control your stomach, you control your mind. Would you agree with that, Melissa?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think gut health and mental health are, again, like completely connected.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, doctors aren't even talking about that yet, really. Like some are, but modern, everyday doctors don't, and it's mind blowing.
It is
So,
mind blowing, isn't
yeah.
it?
But to extend on what Jamie said, thinking like, you know, all the things that we can do like for ourselves and like internal, you can take that and think externally too about like who you surround yourself with and
Right.
like what you surround yourself with, the things, the tangible things. Like even like a clean office or a clean home is like, for me, like talking about self-care, my form of self-care is having a clean home. because when my house is not clean and orderly and things are chaotic in there, then my thoughts are chaotic and I can't focus. So, I mean, discipline is just like, it's everything and everywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
100%. I couldn't agree more. Janelle and I have had conversations about this because, as you guys are well aware, she owns a cleaning company.
Extremely passionate about cleaning. Yeah.
Well, but we talked about, I asked her, I said, well, what are you really selling? And what you're really selling is like that peace of mind, that mental clarity, that mental health. There have been articles written about scientific studies that have documented the fact that, yeah, your physical environment affects your internal world and vice versa. Yeah, so absolutely. What about time? Be disciplined with our time. Time is one of those things that people talk about time management. Time management, that phrase that's a bunch of bullshit. You can't manage time. No matter how hard you try, time does what time will always do, and it will pass. All you can do is manage yourself, your time, or your energy, your attention, your focus, and the activities that you do in that time. So how are you using your time? Really, there's only 3 things that you can do with time. You can spend it doing an activity that you enjoy, like going for a walk or fishing or playing with your kids or something. You can waste it. Most people waste more time than they would ever need in order to achieve their goals. Right. Or invest it. There's only 3 things you can do with time: spend it, waste it, or invest it. Now, the problem with time is, and Janelle will tell you, hey, Janelle, we talk about time as one of your most precious resources. Why is one of your most precious resources?
Because you'll never get it back.
Right. Because once you spend it, you ain't never getting it back. 100%. In fact, people have talked about the importance of scheduling daily tasks and weekly tasks. They say, show me your calendar and I'll show you your priorities. And if you're not structured with your calendar and structured with your time, then by default, you're using it unconsciously, unaware of how you're using it. Right? And your calendar is actually one of your most powerful personal development tools that you own. Because I find that when you plug it into your calendar, it happens. That's when things really become real. Or what about money? Jamie mentioned finances. You probably noticed that like money is constantly moving in and out of your bank accounts all the time. Sometimes more out than in, but it's constantly moving in and out. But it's how you're directing the out that's going to determine a lot of things, isn't it? Are you consciously directing where you're spending that and investing that? It's either moving towards what it is that's going to help you grow and help you learn and help you expand and help you succeed, or it's the shotgun approach. In fact, Neville Goddard, who, if you guys are not familiar with Neville Goddard, he's an unbelievably gifted philosopher. Okay. He wrote an essay called The Coin of Heaven. The Coin of Heaven. One of these lines that jumped out at me from The Coin of Heaven, he says that you must stop spending your thoughts, time, and money. He says everything must be an investment. Okay. To spend is to waste or to squander. To lay out without any expectation of return. He says, but to invest is to lay out for a purpose from which a profit is expected. Everything must be an investment. Okay, stop spending your thoughts, stop spending your time, and stop spending your money. Invest it. Be smart, be disciplined with your thoughts, with your time, with your money. Okay. I'm surprised that he didn't elaborate a little bit more on that, but Last thing here, and then I'll let you guys go. I know we're going a little bit overtime here. The last page, the last line or paragraph of this enforced self-discipline essay, okay? He talks about the power of the will. And he says that the greatest manifestation of self-discipline is in the strength of your will. In the strength of your will. The power of a will trained by discipline is an irresistible force. The only limit on that power is the one that you impose on it by restricting or ignoring your self-discipline. Okay. This is the part that got me. History and folklore are full of stories of people whose wills alone have triumphed over death and other incredible adversities. I'm sure we can all think of people and stories and the things that movies are made of, right? He says, but who remembers the people whose weak wills kept them mirrored in mediocrity? Oh, yeah. Not many. So this week, your guys' homework is to, I'm going to share and upload a recording of Earl Nightingale reading The Common Denominator of Success. And I highly suggest listening to it. And in fact, I would encourage you guys to make time to listen to it every day for the next week. Okay, sometimes I find that listening to these audio recordings is a little easier than making time to read them. This one's about 15 minutes long. So I don't know if it's while you're in the shower, getting ready for work, driving in the car, or something like that. But do your best to make time to listen to The Common Denominator of Success. I'll share it in our group chat and text it if that works better. But right on, you guys. Well, hey, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Happy Friday and enjoy the weekend. Take
Thanks,
care.
Matt.
Talk soon, everybody.